He had been measuring his days in small defeats for so long that he did not remember when victory last visited his doorstep. Rent past due notices curling at the corners like tired leaves, calls from numbers he no longer answered because the answers he could give were always the same: "I'm sorry, not yet, maybe next week." Friends drifted from regular check-ins to occasional thumbs up emojis to nothing at all. His mother's voice that once filled Sunday kitchens with hymns had gone quiet since the funeral, and the apartment carried the echo of absence the way an empty church holds yesterday's incense. He kept his world narrowed to a mattress, a sink piled with cups, a chipped table, and a phone with a web of cracks across the glass like ice on a winter pond. The phone had taken a hard fall the day he learned the last job had chosen someone else. The impact spidered the screen, and something in him had splintered too. He propped it against a mug and watched it struggle to stay alive. Battery blinking red, the glow uneven, as if light itself were limping. He told himself he would leave it on in case someone reached out, though he knew no one would. It was a thought that hurt more than hunger, and he stopped eating much because hunger gave him something concrete to blame. He made a plan without calling it a plan, the way a river makes a plan without making any promises. He would finish the bottle, he would scribble a brief note: "Thank you, I tried, I'm tired," and then he would walk to the bridge while the city's evening traffic hushed into the kind of darkness that hides men from their neighbors. He had already chosen the shoes without squeaky soles and the jacket with heavy pockets, and he could feel the horrible relief of deciding, the way a runner feels relief when the finish line finally appears. He sat on the floor because chairs felt too hopeful, and listened to the refrigerator hum like a far-off engine headed for a place he would never see. The phone dimmed further, and he let it because the room was easier to bear when the lights were low. He closed his eyes and let memory play the old reels. When he was 9 and the sun made galaxies in the dish soap, his mother taught him to swirl when he was 12. And a teacher wrote promising on the corner of an essay when he was 17, and someone he loved said forever and meant it until they didn't. He remembered the first night the panic arrived and would not leave the doctor visits that gave him new words without giving him new breath. He remembered every small sorrow until his chest ached from carrying them all these miles. He picked up the phone mostly to silence it, but it woke with a thin, stubborn glow and showed the lock screen with its crooked numbers. And then, without his touching anything, it shivered in his palm. A small, weak buzz like the heartbeat of a bird, and a single message slid across the fissured glass, not from a saved name, not from an unknown number, just there. Like handwriting on water: "Don't quit. You are loved." He stared and stared, not understanding how the letters could be so clear while the glass between them was so broken. He said out loud to no one, "I didn't send that." He pinched the screen trying to pull up the sender, but there was nothing, no thread, no details, no history, only those words, clean and absurd and impossible. He felt heat rise behind his eyes the way heat rises behind storm clouds, and his throat closed the way a door closes when wind catches it, and he waited for anger or laughter or disbelief. But what came instead was breath, the kind that fills lungs all the way to the edges, and he realized he had not taken a full breath in months. He read the message again: "Don't quit. You are loved." And the room's hard outlines softened. The humming refrigerator became a chorus. The cracked glass looked like stained glass, and for a moment he was not a man failing. He was a boy again, at a wooden pew while a hymn wrapped gentleness around his ribs. He whispered "Mom," as if the word might call her back. And when the air only answered with quiet, he tried something he had not tried since hospital waiting rooms and traffic accidents. He said, "God, if you are still there, if you are in this room, if you type that with light or with mercy, I can't quit if you tell me not to." And the strange thing was that he felt not scolded, but held. He set the phone face down like one sets down a letter that has already done its work, and he slid the note he had planned to write under a book, as if burying it could starve it of oxygen. He drank water, the regular kind, not the kind he had chosen to forget with, and when his stomach lurched, he let it, because living sometimes feels like lurching. He slept a jagged sleep on the mattress and woke thinking maybe he had dreamed everything, and grabbed the phone with the hunger of a man reaching for rope. But when the screen came to life, the message was gone, the log empty, the inbox unchanged, the notification shade clean as new snow. He searched for it the way a child searches the shore for a vanished shell. He dug through folders and backups. He rebooted twice. He cursed and apologized and asked aloud, "Where did you go?" But the words refused to appear. Again, he should have felt cheated, yet oddly he did not, because their echo had already carved itself onto the stone. Of him and stone remembers he stood under the shower and let hot water knock a small drumbeat out of his shoulders. He opened the window and let the air in, even though it carried traffic and siren and the burnt sugar smell from the bakery that reminded him of holidays that no longer came. He made coffee badly. He ate the last apple slow. He paid one bill he could not fully afford because the choice to pay was a choice to remain. And he told himself out loud like a coach, "You are loved." That afternoon, he took a walk without a destination and ended up passing the bridge he had planned to make his boundary. He stopped and leaned on the railing and watched the river practice being a river, and for the first time he looked at it as something that would be there tomorrow when he returned, rather than something that would take him away forever. He did not tell anyone, because holy things often shrink under noisy handling. He conserved the story like a flame cupped in two hands. He carried it into mornings that were still heavy and nights that still stretched cruelly long. When the phone rang with debt, he answered and said, "I'm working on it." When a job posting looked too ambitious, he applied anyway. When the landlord knocked, he opened the door rather than pretending not to be home. And once in a while in grocery aisles or at bus stops, he would feel the small soft buzz of hope at the edge of his pocket, as if the message was still alive and paging him, and he would put a hand there, like a man checking that a letter had not fallen out months. Turned the corner into a new year. He gained a part-time shift that became full-time and then became a better offer because he showed up every day like a man who had been told to stay. He bought a used couch, carried up the stairs by a neighbor who waved away thanks and accepted half a pizza as payment. He found a church smaller than his fear of churches and sat in the back row with the kind of people who also sat in back rows. And when a song about being loved found him, he did not bolt. He let the words rest on him lightly like snow on a sleeve. He learned to call his sister on Sunday afternoons and let her talk until the conversation found its own easy rhythm. He opened the box of his mother's old things on a rainy night and found recipes and notes and a scrap of paper where she had written "praying for you" at 11:17 p.m. and a date that matched the night he had held the phone and gasped, and he sat on the floor and laughed and cried at the same time because time itself had joined the conspiracy of love. He told no one for nearly a year. Then the first person arrived who needed what he had been given, a coworker with humor sharpened into knives who finally admitted in a stairwell that he was done with the fight. The man listened for a long time and then said, "Can I tell you something strange?" And he told the story like a testimony that refuses to be a lecture. The cracks, the glow, the words, the vanishing, the breath. And when he finished, the coworker wiped his eyes with a sleeve and said, "I don't believe in much, but I believe you." And sometimes that is the doorway to believing. And more weeks later, another acquaintance said her son had lost himself, and the man printed the sentence on a small card and gave it to her. "Don't quit, you are loved." And she said, "Is that a quote from a book?" And he said, "Not one you can buy, but one you can read." And she smiled without understanding, and that was enough. The message moved across town, across screens, across lunch breaks, like a seed carried in the tread of a shoe. It found hospital rooms and train platforms and a bench outside the shelter where men kept returning, because returning is the first victory. It found a bar where a man who had dropped his phone 100 times found it still capable of performing a miracle. He did not travel to tell it on stages. He told it quietly over coffee, over grocery carts, over the backs of pews. When someone said, "I don't know how to keep going," he answered, "Me neither some days. But then I remember what I was told. And I keep going one more day, and sometimes one more day is all a soul needs to survive." Until the next sunrise, he kept the broken phone in a drawer, wrapped in an old shirt, as if it were a relic. When he moved to a better apartment, he placed it in the new drawer with ceremony, like repotting a plant he could never water. He showed it To no one, because some relics lose their charge when you pass them around, but on nights when he felt the old weight pressing its forehead against his own, he took it out and held it and said the sentence aloud until it sounded less like a command and more like a promise. Don't quit. You are loved. He grew older the way all honest people do, by telling the truth to himself. More often the truth that he was not over anything but walking through everything, the truth that love did not erase debt or grief, but put an arm around him while he paid and mourned, the truth that miracles sometimes look like ordinary days survived. He learned to cook 3 things while he planted a stubborn basil in a chipped pot. He wrote his mother's pie recipe on a note card and made it badly and then better and then good enough to take to a neighbor who had just welcomed a daughter. He bought a new phone and kept its glass whole with a case that made it look indestructible, but he never forgot that it was not the phone that saved him. It was the message, and not only the message, but the sender, and not only the sender, but the love behind the sender, and not only the love, but the timing of that love, which arrived precisely when surrender had sharpened like a blade. He could never explain how a text could appear without a record. He could not persuade a skeptic who demanded screenshots, but when he told the story, their eyes softened, and sometimes that softness was a miracle of its own. He visited the bridge again on an anniversary, not to rehearse the old ending, but to celebrate the new beginning. He stood there, hands on cold rail, and whispered thank you into river noise, and it felt like his gratitude joined thousands of others spoken on bridges and bedsides and emergency room chairs by people who had been surprised by mercy at the last minute. He noticed the sky lean from blue to copper and thought how many sunsets he would have missed had a few words not arrived to insist he stay for them. He stepped into a season when restlessness told him to move cities and success promised to erase memory, but he decided to become faithful instead. He volunteered to answer phones for a helpline on Tuesdays and did not know that on his 5th week, a stranger would cry softly and say, "A broken phone told me not to quit," and he would grip the handset and close his eyes because he understood and say, "Mine did too," and the line would go quiet, then safe. He kept telling the story as if he were returning found money to its rightful owners. He used it to bridge conversations into prayer. He used it to place hands on shoulders. He used it like bread. He kept tearing, and it kept not running out. And every time he spoke it, he felt again the first warmth returning like a tide that always knows its shoreline. He learned to expect that, at the end of many days, there would be one person who needed those words, and he tried to be the kind of man who was ready when the need arrived. He also learned to say the sentence to himself when no one was listening, sometimes in the mirror before interviews, sometimes under his breath walking home from difficult visits, sometimes in the middle of the night when fear rehearsed worst possibilities in the darkness. Don't quit. You are loved. And the words steadied him like a handrail. He built a small circle of friends who knew when to call, and one day he told them the whole story, and none of them laughed, and one of them said, "You think God sent that text?" And he said, "I think love did, and God is love." And they nodded, because sometimes simple is strong. He kept living, and that became his loudest sermon. And if you ask him now what the point of the message was, he will say, "To get me to the next morning, and then to the next, and then to a life where I can pass it on." He will say also that the message was never meant for him alone. It was meant for whoever would hear it next, including you. So if you have found this story at your lowest hour, if everything inside you keeps whispering, finish it and be done. Listen harder to the quieter voice arriving through the cracks of your own night. It says the same simple, steady thing: don't quit. You are loved. And it will keep saying it until the weight lifts enough for you to stand and take one step. And if all you can do today is breathe and wait, that is enough for now, because tomorrow will need you, and people you have not met yet will need you. And there is a future where you become the one who says the sentence to someone else. And when you do, you will recognize the look in their eyes, the way a man recognizes his own handwriting. This is Faith Light Stories, and our heart is to carry light into dark rooms with testimonies like this. If these words met you, or share this video with one person who might need it, subscribe for more true stories of grace that interrupt despair. And in the comments, tell us about a time hope surprised you, or simply write the sentence for someone who will read it hours from now. Don't quit. You are loved, because your comment may be the message that keeps a soul here for one more sunrise.